Welcome back to the Financial Self-Care Club, Shannon.
Thanks. It's great to be with you, Christy.
I'm so excited to have you back for another episode, continuing the conversation around money mindset, one of my favorite topics. And
Yes.
today we have a big one. We have a pretty loaded topic, right, Shannon?
Yes, we do. This is a very valuable topic in many ways.
Yes, we are talking all about intuition. And I know this is something that I struggle with, and I'm sure many of your clients, Shannon, many of my clients struggle with this as well. So I'm excited to dive in and unpack this a little bit more. But to kick off, I'd love to hear a little bit more about kind of how you think about intuition. What does that mean to you?
So typically when I think about intuition, it's really about that goosebumpy kind of feeling that comes over me where I just have a certainty, an assurance, a solid knowing that something is right on track for me. Typically it comes up when I'm making a decision a lot of times, right? I'm deciding like, do I go left? Do I go right? Literally sometimes in the car, but also more so in business decisions or life decisions. And for me, the intuition really comes up of that gut instinct, knowing with absolute certainty that here's the next right step for me in this moment.
Yeah, that sounds like goals right there. I'm listening to this. I'm like, wow, I'm a very indecisive person, right? And I definitely struggle to know which voices or thoughts are the right ones, right? Are some of these coming in as shoulds, as fears,
Mm-hmm.
or is this my intuition speaking, my gut speaking? And I find it hard to distinguish between some of the two. So how do you use intuition or in your decision making, or talk to me about intuition and decision making, and how can I become more decisive?
Yeah, I think that's a really top of mind goal that a lot of people have is to figure out how to be more in tune with their intuition and a little bit less in their head about their decisions. And I don't want to give off any false impressions here. I mean, I have some good examples of times when I have either listened to my gut and followed through and learned something really valuable, or times when I ignored it and then also learned something valuable. But I am definitely human and spend a lot of time in my head overthinking things too. So it's a practice daily, which we'll get into a
Yes.
little bit later. But in terms of your point about differentiating the conversation in your head that happens when you're being guided by your intuition versus when you are being pulled by some kind of a fear-based programming in your mind. The way that I would explain this best is that when you are hearing those thoughts that say, oh, you really should do this because if not, all these bad things are going to happen. That's your fear talking. And I'll give you an example. A couple of years back when I was I was really passionate about yoga, and I had been practicing for about a year at a studio that I really liked here in Miami. And there was an opportunity to go to Mexico on a yoga immersion trip, which I was really gung-ho about. And they had like an advanced level where you could go on the trip and stay longer and do like a study course to become a teacher. But for the most part, I was not really feeling that. I just wanted to go in deep in my practice. And as the trip came up, a week before we left, broke my toe, my big toe. I ran
Oh
into a couch
no.
in our house. It was like all these signs were telling me like, just go to like do the yoga practice, relax, reconnect with yourself. Meanwhile, the founder of the studio was in my ear, kind of like trying to pressure me to go forward and do the teacher certification while we were there. So all these signs were kind of telling me, no, don't do that. But I had this voice in my head that was like, you should really listen to her, because if you go forward and you do the teacher certification, you'll probably be able to blend yoga and coaching together. You'll be able to get more clients. It'll help you be more visible. But it was also coming from this like deep place of lack. Like, you don't have enough clients right now, so you've got to do this. Otherwise, you're going to tank in your business. That was fear. And so I actually did go on the trip and was convinced to do the teacher training, and came back and then went through the rest of the program here in Miami, or attempted to, but I never finished it. And I remember beating myself up a lot because I was like, geez, I really should have listened to my gut telling me like, it's okay to just practice yoga for the love of yoga. and not need to monetize it as part of your business. Like your business will do fine without the yoga. But it took me going through that very painful experience. It cost me extra time, extra money, like all the things that I didn't really need to spend, but it was a valuable lesson in the end. Does that help kind of explain the difference between the conversations?
Definitely. I am kind of gathering that there's kind of that lack energy that is beneath decisions that are based maybe out of fear or following the shoulds. And almost in your example, it was like kind of trying to chase, whether it was more money or more clients or more business, where your real motivation was to have fun and to have joy. And so maybe the difference is kind of digging into where that energy and that motivation is stemming from. Do you feel like that's a good way to get to the root cause of it, or the decision of, is this my intuition or is this fear and shoulds?
Yes, the motivation piece is really important, because if your motivation is fear-based, you're going to end up right back where you started, just looking around at different circumstances that might be slightly worse than before. Whereas that inner wisdom pull to move you forward, it's a more trusted, knowing type of motivation. Like, I'm going to be okay regardless. It's giving yourself permission to like have fun and go on a trip without having to have it be about work, like the balance between doing and being. I think intuition a lot of times is the being, and that knowing that it's okay to just like be here now. And the fear is like always trying to get to some undetermined end outcome. And the fear is always trying to get you to do that process, no matter how painful it might be. Cause it's like, well, once you get to the finish line, then you can feel good. And the intuition is more the wisdom of, it's okay to feel good in the process as you pursue the goals, because you want to do it in a way that feels good for you.
Yes.
And then as the course changes and, you hit many successes along the way, that's fine. We're not trying to get to some finish line and wait to feel good until we get there. So yeah,
I love that. That is gold, Shannon, because I am telling you, I feel like, and I see this a lot, maybe it's the entrepreneur mindset, the high achiever mindset, but It's about, get to the result, get to the finish line, achieve. And it's a intentional mindset shift, at least for me, to get to that place of being open and receiving and trusting and letting myself be guided by my inner wisdom, or whatever that looks like. And that's such a hard shift to make. So it feels like it's almost like a bit of a muscle, right? It takes practice. It's something that you have to exercise and warm up regularly. Tell me a little bit more about what your journey's been like in developing, trusting your intuition. Any other, mistakes or roadblocks that you've come across, or how's that practice been unfolding for you?
Yeah, it definitely continues to unfold. Anytime there's a big decision to make for me, the intuition is there for sure. It happens on a daily basis as well. But one of the other kind of pivotal times in my business where I experienced what it felt like so intuition sometimes is going to be the answer that you want it to be. So you're going to get that intuitive hit, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to go to that concert and I'm going to, have a great time and probably meet someone that's going to end up leading me in a direction that'll create an opportunity. And you follow that hit and everything turns out the way you wanted it to, and it feels really positive and uplifting. And then the other side of intuition is that it helps you to learn the lessons that you need to learn at the time you need to learn them. So it's not always going to give you the sweet circumstances where everything just works out tied up with a neat little bow and it feels,
why not?
Why not, right? Well, as they say, there's always these like subtle hints. It's trying to get in touch with you all the time if we allow it to and we listen to it. And this is one of the benefits of developing your practice with your intuition, is that the more you open up the channel with your intuition, the more that you're able to get the subtle hints, and you don't have to wait to get the really painful lesson.
Like when you stub your toe before you go to the yoga certification.
Right. And pay like a couple $1,000s extra to get certified as a teacher and then not finish the program.
Felt that one physically in your pocket. Thank you for the intuitive hit.
In all the ways. And had I just trusted from the beginning, things would have turned out differently. However, in this example, There was a stage in my business where I was pivoting away from corporate career fulfillment coaching, which is what I started my coaching business with. And I was moving more into this space of recognizing that other entrepreneurs like myself who were trying to be, grow and build their business and be successful, they were running into blocks around how much money, their own like inner glass ceiling, if you will, of how much money they really could make and what that meant for them and how capable they were of creating this successful business. And I was personally running up against some of these blocks. So I thought that I needed a money mindset coach who was going to be able to help me solve my conundrums with money and help me kind of figure out my relationship with it once and for all on a deep mindset level. So I hired a money mindset coach a couple of years ago. And what I immediately realized was that instead of being a true mindset coach, and mind you, I hired her with this excitement inside of me because she was endorsed by another expert that I followed greatly and had been following on my whole personal development journey. So I thought, yeah, for sure, she's going to be a very helpful resource for me. So I had this excitement. It felt like my intuition was on board. Go hire this woman. And when I started working with her, what immediately became clear was that she was more of like a spreadsheet pushing type of person, which is, yes, one level of expertise. And it is helpful to some people to have that. But what I was really looking for was a mindset resource, someone who was going to be able to help me work through what was holding me up from making more money in my business. And so through that experience of investing in her and realizing that she wasn't who I thought she was, I lost a lot of money. That was a more expensive intuitive ignoring my intuition than the yoga experience. But what I really gleaned from that was this valuable lesson that I don't have to always look for someone else to help me with what I need to learn most. Yes. I am capable of teaching myself on this topic, and look at what it's been able to do for me, right? The second that I hired her, realized she wasn't who she said she was, ended up firing her, losing all this money. That was when my wake up call came that like, I want to up level my money mindset. So I'm going to read the books and I'm going to figure out what all the exercises are that I need to do. And then over time that evolved into me being able to help other people with that. Yes. So valuable lesson, but intuition can have a way of helping you to learn that feels a little bit circuitous and not super direct.
Yeah. And I love that lesson brought you to where you are today as a money mindset coach. So sometimes intuition not being in connection with you can lead to really great things, right? So I think this is a good lesson for the listeners here is if you have made a mistake with your intuition, it's not the end of the world. Give yourself some grace. It's okay because things are going to keep going. You can always move forward and look where you are now after having a little bit of a disconnect with your intuition there. Now, granted, it wasn't fun for the bank account and these lessons are not easy to go through.
Sure, yeah.
But I love seeing how it's led you not only to where you are today, but also started that practice of trusting your intuition and using that muscle. I think that's super great. So as you've kind of been opening yourself up to these intuitive messages, what's that process looked like? Because I don't know that I can always distinguish between intuition and ego or fear or shoulds, right? Like we talked about in the beginning. So how do you start to open yourself up
to the intuition?
Yeah.
Well, first, I think you got to be aware of what blocks your intuition. That's usually an easier place for people to start than the whole, like, how do I access my intuition? So figuring out what for you feels like the biggest block to accessing your intuition. So it could be like fear of making the wrong decision. And that leads you to consume all this extra information and do all this research and take in other people's opinions and never really feeling like you yourself know what answer is best for you. So that's one example of how people can block their own intuition. Overthinking or analysis paralysis builds off of that same example. So any way that you are recognizing like, okay, this is when I get in my head about a decision, start paying attention to what habits you have in place today that might be what's getting in your way of accessing that intuition. and then kind of asking yourself, how can I remove these blocks? So sometimes that's where you need another expert to kind of help you in terms of whether it's one-on-one coaching or group coaching program. And this is what I help my clients with on as well, is being able to sort of detect what specific thought patterns are getting in the way of you being able to open up a channel with your inner knowing and being able to listen to that. But oftentimes we have a hard time seeing that for ourselves because it's part of us and part of our subconscious that we've been doing for however many decades we've been on this planet. So sometimes you got to cut yourself some slack if you need to like bounce it off a friend or an expert who can help ask you the right questions to figure out which blocks are getting in your way. And then in terms of making your intuition come alive, it really is like a daily practice where you're always fine-tuning that. So I have a really helpful and I think relatively straightforward, simple 5-step way for you to start to hone that intuition. So let's go through that and see what comes out of that to see if that can be helpful.
Tips.
So next time you get an intuitive hit and you have that goosebumpy feeling or whatever it looks like for you, get out a journal and write down what that specific feeling is that you are experiencing when you've got that intuitive hit. Okay. And then reflect on like, see how much you can take the focus on the feeling and pick like 1 or 2 keywords that you would use to describe what it felt like when you got the intuitive hit. Maybe what you were looking at or where you were, and try to like explain that experience in your journal, right? Either typing on your phone or put pen to paper. So you get the intuitive hit, you focus on the feeling, and then reflect on what specifically that feeling was that you're experiencing. And then the third step is to take action on that intuitive hit. So just go experiment with it, right? If you're not sure of how to make this decision, like take 1 step toward it. And then the 4th step is to reflect again. How accurate was my intuition in hindsight? Like now that I've acted on it, did that feeling really give me the intuitive hit, or was that something that came more from a fear-based place of me being worried about how other people were going to perceive me, let's say. And then you repeat step 5. So like I said, this is really like, it requires practice to familiarize yourself with your intuition. But I think the more you can jot down, here's the intuitive hit I got, here's the feeling that came from it, let me go take some action on it. Now let me reflect on how accurate that was, and keep doing it over and over. You then begin to distinguish between, okay, these are the core feelings that I'm getting, and I will know that it's my intuition when I have that feeling, versus the fear side of it that might be trying to push you in a direction based on a lack mentality of what you need to be afraid of.
Strengthening that muscle of being able to distinguish between the voices. That's amazing. So the 5 steps, just so I can remember, first is when you get that intuitive hit, to be aware of it, right? Just notice it.
Notice it. Exactly. And you can write down step 1, like, what did I get the intuitive hit about? Mm-hmm. It was to go to this event because I'll probably, have this synchronicity happen, or whatever it was for you. So that's step 1.
Write it down. Step 2 is to reflect on it. So what did it feel like when you got it? Even things like, where were you, right? What your surroundings were, how you were feeling, what you were thinking, just noticing the sensations that come with an intuitive hit, right? So we notice that when we get them again, it might be intuition and not fear. Step 3 is to
experiment.
Take action.
Yes, exactly. Go do a thing.
This one's hard because I feel like people still are overwhelmed. How do they know what action to take? But I think experiment was a great word that you used, right? It doesn't have to be a big pressure thing.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to that core element of trust that is really a big function of intuition, is like learning that, you know what, it's okay for me to go and experiment with this and take the 1 action step. So let's say for you, it's, you have a prospective client that you had a conversation with, and then they were not sure if they wanted to work with you. And then all of a sudden you're in the shower and they crossed your mind. And you kind of feel this sense of like, even though they didn't get back to me, I feel like they're still out there in indecision mode. And based on our initial conversation, like this could really help them. Like the tools I have to teach could really help them get out of the situation that they're in where they're feeling stressed about their money. Right. So then your action could be, I'm just going to send them a little love note. Like, hey, you crossed my mind today. We had a conversation a couple weeks ago. I never did hear back, and there's no pressure either way, but was curious if you had, made a choice about what you wanted to do about moving forward.
Yeah. So you connect your action to that initial.
Correct. To the initial intuitive hit and the feeling. And then let's say that person emails you back right away and it's like, oh, I've been meaning to reach back out to you. X, Y, and Z happened. It's just been so crazy. Like, yes, if you can send me the invoice again, I will definitely pay it. And I'm ready to schedule the first session. And then you're like, oh, okay. Nice. Intuition, rock on. This is something I want to pay attention to and like hone in on that feeling next time. And then like, if they say, no, I don't want to work with you, or they don't get back to you, they ghost you again or something, there's also valuable information that can be taken from there, because chances are, let's say they ghost you and they don't reply to that email. Well, you go back to your initial conversation with them and maybe you need to reflect on, was there a moment in that conversation where I intuitively, instinctively knew that they were a no from the beginning, maybe even before you scheduled the call with them? Yeah. But you went ahead and did it anyway because the voice of fear was like, you got to pay that bill, you need another client, whatever it was that drove you to get on the phone with them. But maybe intuitively you kind of had a feeling that they were not really ready for coaching, or that they, had other plans or didn't really have the ability to invest, whatever it was. So does that help with like how to go through the steps?
Yeah, because after you've taken the action, then that's step 4, which is to reflect again and see, depending on which way it went, what you can learn and what you can take away from there. And then you repeat and you do it all over again. I love that. I think everyone needs to do that exercise. Do you feel like you are seeing common struggles with clients, with yourself, with people you're talking to as you're going through those different exercises and just working on strengthening that intuition? Are you feeling like you're seeing common themes amongst struggles people are having?
I would say the biggest thing I see is people feeling the need to get external information, whether that's through books, podcasts, or talking to other people to validate their decisions. That's probably the most common thing that I see is people like, how do you detach from that desire to get validation outside of yourself and learn that it's okay to trust your own knowing and feeling into the fact that like, it's not going to feel good every time, right? We are always after that sense of pleasure. And the reality is like, you got to trust the knowing and realize that sometimes it's going to take you down a path of like skipping and everything's great. And then other times you're going to be like trying to skip on a road that has all these potholes and you're going to fall on your face. Like it's just, that's how it works. And I think we're so conditioned, especially just in our education system. We spend all these years in school where we're like learning from someone else, and then we take a test and we get a grade that evaluates our performance. But then you get out into the real world and it's more about how you experience the world and trying to like go out there and take action. It really is a key component of honing your intuition, is to like get the hit, feel the feeling, go take an action, and then decide whether, that was a really intuitively guided choice or that was more fear-based, instead of pulling into that tendency of asking other people or consuming knowledge, because data can only help you to a certain point. Like look at decisions you've made in the past that were strictly based on, the conversations you had with other people or all the books and information you consumed. How did those decisions turn out for you? A lot of times we have already had that intuitive hit from the beginning, and we just like go on autopilot to go get all that external information only to come right back to the place of the inner knowing.
Oh yeah. So, I've done this, buying courses, listening to all the 100%. Podcasts, when instead I just needed to be getting out there and doing something. And I love that, because that relates back to your lesson with the money mindset coach, which is that you already have the answers within you. And sure, we do need support, and it's great to talk things out and to have coaches and to invest in education, but it's knowing the difference of, when you're doing it because you're not trusting your intuition versus when you're doing it because, you have a specific outcome you're looking to solve, or you're looking to get to that next level. It's not as much of a Band-Aid solution as, a well thought out, intentionally made decision. And that's where, you can cost yourself money too, right?
Yeah.
Bringing
And
it back to financial self-care is like,
for sure. And you bring up a really good point, tuning it back to your motivation and really checking in with yourself to say, like, what is the reason why I'm feeling called to reach out to all these other people or read all these books and listen to these podcast episodes? I mean, I consume information a lot too, but there have definitely been times in my life where I have to check in and recognize that I'm doing that out of a fear-based path versus like, oh, I've got this hit and like, I'm going to give myself 30 minutes to go research and talk to somebody else who went through, because it's okay to research. You might want to talk to somebody like somebody who's looking to work with you might want to talk to somebody who has already worked with you. And that's part of research. That's fine. But like, if you notice that that's taking over and that's becoming all consuming and it's creating all this extra stress for you, that's when you kind of have to pull it back and do that reality check of like, okay, center myself, connect, and figure out if I'm really like fooling myself here or if I'm actually following an intuitive
principle. I love that. I think one of the hardest struggles with that, at least speaking personally, is having that self-trust, having the patience, having the faith that it's all going to work out. I want to see the results I want to achieve. And I've also struggled with, doubts and fears and not feeling good enough, not feeling deserving. So those scripts, those underlying fears you were talking about, many times have held me back from being able to fully trust myself and take action from an intuitive place. Do you feel like you see that roadblock or that fear coming in a lot with clients as well?
Yeah, the thoughts themselves are so powerful. Like they have a hold over us that we, as I said before, it's hard to even recognize that sometimes because it's such a deep part of us that we've been programmed with from, a young age. And no matter how much we've tried to grow into our own independent thinking selves, values of our parents, it's part of us, let's say around money. And so making a conscious choice to just go out there and do something, no matter how small or imperfect it might be, I think is a really valuable way to gather evidence, through your experiment and then keep moving forward because you'll learn something that's going to help you to apply it to the next time you take action. It doesn't have to be something really huge, and it's super vulnerable. It can be that you start with these little tiny action steps that feel like, okay, it scares me a little bit, but I'm willing to go out there and do it. Because if it's too big, you'll notice that you just procrastinate on it forever and you'll never get it done. Whether it's like reaching out to get something published or be a speaker somewhere, that might mean that if you're running up against the procrastination, it could have various different meanings, which we could have a whole nother lesson on. But that's a good time to check in with yourself to say, okay, maybe I just want to chunk this down into like a little bit of a smaller action step for me to experiment with. And yes, the thoughts are powerful, but guarantee you will gain confidence by taking action. Confidence is not a precursor to taking action in most cases. You got to do something to feel the confidence.
100%. And I think that's a great lesson too, right? If something feels overwhelming and feels big, breaking it down into those smaller action steps, that's amazing. And this is why I love money mindset so much, right?
For sure.
I'm a financial planner. I'm practical. I got the strategies, but I know from my personal experience and working with clients that strategies is, part of the battle. Most of the battle is with your mindset and learning skills like intuition and trusting yourself and knowing how to make decisions from that place of joy and ease and fun, as opposed to that place of lack and fear and should. So thank you so much.
Good way to sum it up.
Yes. Thank you for sharing all of your insights. Everybody, I'm going to give you some homework. I want you to do Shannon's exercise, her 5 steps, which are awareness, reflect, action, reflect, repeat. And once you've done it, let Shannon know how it goes. Send her a DM on Instagram. Shannon, what's your Instagram handle? Where can we find you?
Yeah, so I'm under Ishiki Insights. So if you search for Ishiki, Ishiki Insights, it'll come up under Instagram. Yeah.
Awesome. So everyone go do that. Let Shannon knows how it goes. And thank you so much for being on the show today.
For sure. I'm excited. And even if you guys start the process and get stuck on step 2, reflecting, and you're like, I don't even know if this is an intuitive hit, still come hang out with me on Instagram, send me a message, and I'd be happy to help you kind of work through that so that you can hone your intuition and open up that channel.
Oh, you're the best, Shannon. Thank you so much. We will
You're
talk to you guys
welcome.
later.
Yeah, see ya.
I don't know when I'll cut that.